Welcome to the Cinema Australia podcast with Matthew Eels.
In the olden times, they didn't have prisons. They'd take a goat, they'd put all the sins of the tribe on it, and then they'd send the goat off to die. So they could be free and be forgiven. The scapegoat, they called it.
Maybe sharing a cell with a new inmate, Mark Shepherd.
That new kid, Mel, keep him out of trouble.
What's your relationship like with him?
He seemed very familiar to me. Very.
There's a contract on him. You pull the shit out, and bam, 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 bam. No one would believe you'd ever done this before.
My mum said I got made in prison. So maybe it was always going to go this way.
I'm going to see my son tomorrow, so...
You guys close?
He's not your friend. People like Warren only go down, and they take you with them.
If you can't go through with this...
I am. No. No.
Yeah, well, you better, otherwise we're both fucking dead.
Until you are able to accept yourself, no matter where you are, will be some kind of prison.
That's the trailer for Inside. Hello and welcome to the Cinema Australia podcast. My name is Matthew Eels. In this episode, I'm joined by Charles Williams to discuss Inside, a prison drama starring Guy Pearce, Cosmo Jarvis, Tammy MacIntosh and newcomer Vincent Miller, whose name you should make note of because you're going to hear a lot more from this impressive young actor. After being transferred from juvenile to adult prison, Mel, Vincent Miller, is taken under the wing of both Mark, Cosmo Jarvis, Australia's most despised criminal, and Warren, Guy Pearce, a soon-to-be-paroled inmate. As a paternal triangle grows between them, we see that even the worst of men have a little bit of good inside that will be their undoing. Charles Williams is an acclaimed Australian film director whose short film All These Creatures won the Cannes Film Festival's short film Palme d'Or, as well as an AACTA award here at home. Charles grew up in a remote country town in northern Victoria. Since then, his films have gone on to screen at more than 200 of the world's most prestigious festivals. He has also been selected as part of TIFF's Filmmaker Lab, the Golden Globes Filmmaker Residency, and is a member of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. Inside is Charles' debut feature film. It has a discomforting psychological depth to it, reminiscent of the films of Justin Kurzel like Nitram and Snowtown, and Thomas M. Wright's The Stranger. There's nothing familiar about Charles Williams' filmmaking style though. Inside feels completely unique both visually and narratively. Inside is in cinemas from February 27, with preview screenings happening around the country now. Anyway, enjoy. Charles, thank you for joining the Cinema Australia podcast. It's great to have you on.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Hey, congratulations on Inside. I've watched the film twice now, once in a cinema and most recently at home. I was just as engrossed in this film the second time around, and I really appreciate the small details in the film that most people would probably pick up on a second viewing of the film. And I'm looking forward to discussing some of those details in this interview, but congratulations again. This really is a perfect film in every sense of the word.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for that.
The film's getting a lot of interest at the moment. It played at Perth Festival recently. How have some of the other screenings been? How have you found them?
Really great. I just got back from Sweden, and it played at the Göteborg Film Festival there. And, that's really, it's great to see an international audience and see how, the specificity of what you've done translates, and it was really moving. It's lovely to see, and it seems very emotionally affecting, which is really beautiful. So it's been lovely. It's always great to see a festival audience respond.
Yeah, and that's interesting to hear that it is translating well internationally. It's a very universal story, I suppose. Were you at those screenings? Were you a part of Q&As?
Yes, yeah, it was really beautiful. I think I think people are surprised how resonant the film is with female audiences in particular.
Interesting.
Um, Most of the Q&A audience, I mean, same here. We did Q&A audience questions like the day I got back from Sweden, just Saturday and Sunday, and um, most of the questions and is from a female audience, and people are very, I think people are surprised that it's quite an emotional movie.
Mm, mm. Has that surprised you, the female aspect to the questions that you're getting?
Not totally. I mean, I think that's probably more my perspective.
Yes.
I find men harder to understand. So it's like probably somewhere deep inside that there's probably it's maybe a male skewing story handed from a slightly more feminine perspective, maybe.
Mm.
Um, I don't know, but it's nice. I mean, not just the female audience loving it, but just the international audiences and not feeling like it's a straight like a film that they can't understand or anything like that.
Mm, mm. Yeah, that's interesting that you talk about that. I've been trying to get my wife to watch the film with me, or when I saw it the first time at the cinema, but there was just some things going on. She wasn't able to watch it. But I know that she would enjoy this film, especially from a maternal instinct as well.
Mm.
I just know that she will love it. So I'm really excited for her to watch it. Actually, I've been telling her she must see it.
Oh, great. Yeah, I hope so.
As I do with this podcast, I like to go back to the beginning of the filmmaker's career just a little bit, if that's okay, before we start talking about Inside. But you've been making short films since I Can't Get Started in 2002. But I'm wondering, were there others before that, perhaps homemade films or other films that didn't see the light of day, or was that film really the beginning for you?
No, there were others. There were a lot of short films that I just shot on like a VHS, like a high eight type camera. They had one at the school I went to, and I would just kind of take it, and then you'd edit them on two VHSs basically. You like each edit point just went like clunk in between every time you did a cut point, and that was fun. Like I think I must have made like four or five at least before that one, and that one was like yeah, you shooting on 35 mil and everything. I spent every cent. At least $5 an hour jobs that I'd been working since I was 12 years old at a butcher and a video store and a service station, and I spent all that money making that short film. I can't get started. Yeah.
Were you exploring similar themes all the way back then when you were making films, or were you making more action films, or other things that kids might make?
Yeah, no, no, not at all. Not thematic material at all. Just excitement of the aesthetics. Copying movies that I liked and trying to see what happens if you do a low angle shot and cut it to a close up, or what happens if I put some music here and do this thing, and what happens if it's a documentary, and just kind of like splashing around some paint.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. Do you still have those films? I know a lot of people tell me they've lost them and they're gone now. Do you have any of them lying around?
I think I do. I mean, yeah, there's like a box of some old stuff under the house, and I'm pretty sure I've kept like VHSs of all those. And one day when I've got enough confidence to not feel ashamed of watching them, I'll go and watch them. But for now, I'm not quite there yet. You're like, oh God. But no, I mean, they were. It was just the excitement of like just putting a shot together was just so exciting, of any kind. So yeah, those films were really just exciting, and there's something that's the same that's even today, like just the you once you start putting things together and you're there with a camera, the same kind of panic sets in of like, oh my God, how do I do this again? It's the
Yeah,
same
yeah.
thing. It's always the same problem.
Oh, that's great to hear. All These Creatures is arguably your most celebrated film leading up to Inside, and there are
No, I don't
obvious.
think I don't think, I don't think it's that arguable.
No, no, it's not really. Yeah, that's probably not the right word to use.
Yeah.
But there are obvious comparisons between those two films. Would we be
Yeah.
here talking about Inside right now if you hadn't made and had so much success with All These Creatures?
No, not at all. Yeah, I think it was. I spent years trying to get things made and was unable to, and all these creatures gave me that chance, um, and also permission to. It's already very, very hard to keep faith while you're writing something that this thing will ever get made,
Mm.
particularly if like you're someone that's never, you know, received funding or, offers or whatever it may be. And you'd also, if you're just kind of going through the world a bit alone, you don't have family or money or whatever it may be, it's very hard to allocate the time to dream up a movie that is going to cost millions of dollars, and particularly if your taste in movies isn't like super close to what is getting made, um, then it's very hard for you to believe that this is going to happen and put in all of the work to write something. So making the short film also gave me a little bit more belief that, if I really allocate the time and put in all the effort, that I can probably get something made.
Mm, mm. The film, won a stack of awards, including the Palme d'Or at Cannes. Were you offered other work following that win? Other directing work, for example?
In Australia, no, not a thing. No, but I was offered some things internationally. In fact, one very successful and pretty amazing movie that uh, I was right to not go ahead with. But yeah, won a bunch of Oscars and was very good. But it was not. It was definitely not something that was right for me to do,
Oh,
and
come on. What was it?
it was improper to say, really.
Yes.
I don't know, but maybe I shouldn't. I'm not. I'm not.
Yes.
It was a very good movie, though, and I think that the right director took it on board. I knew at the last minute I was a great script, but it was like I know nothing about this, and it's important that the director comes from this country, and I was not the right person to make it. So but to your question, there were a few offers internationally. A lot of them, except for that one, were not particularly promising or things that I would be particularly good or get made or um, give me a lot of say in how it got made. It's one thing to be a director, but if your taste and opinion is not particularly, if you're not in control or if you're not really in a position of power, then it doesn't really matter. So yeah, so Inside was still like, this is the thing that needs to move forward.
Yeah, it's interesting there. I picked up that you emphasized the word internationally, and you also said not in Australia. Is that how does that sit with you that you weren't offered work locally after this success?
Well, I'm not thrilled, but I mean, it seemed like a continuation, I guess. Like I'd not had much opportunity or I always felt like I was on the outside of any industry in Australia before All These Creatures for all those years, and it sort of felt like there that that was still kind of true to some extent after it. Um, I knew a lot of filmmakers that were getting offers for things and doing things, but
Yeah.
that's just the way it was, and that's the way it went. And I certainly can't complain about it.
Yes.
It'd be pretty churlish to whinge after you're fortunate enough to win a Palme d'Or,
Yeah.
and regardless of how whatever sacrifices you've made to make a feature, I still am fortunate.
Yes, yeah. And I guess I'm thinking of other filmmakers like Ben Young, who made Hounds of Love, and Zach Hilditch, who made These Final Hours. You know, they had incredible international success, those two films, and they struggled to find work at home as well, but were offered work overseas. So it's just an
Yeah,
interesting comparison to make.
it certainly is. I don't have a an easy answer for why that is.
Mm,
And you're sort of living with the effect of it uh, more than you're living with the ability to go, why is this and da da da. And it's also not a healthy thing to, you don't want to. You could be bitter about something or
yeah,
whatever, and it may well be that there's just not you're not appropriate for the things people are trying to make, or
that's
that
great.
there's not a lot being made, and
Mm,
there's a lot that's authored, so people are making their own projects. So, I don't know, but
yeah, yeah.
it certainly pushed me to make sure that Insight got made. Like
Yeah.
it was make this or make nothing.
Yeah, and thankfully we got Inside, as I said, a perfect film. I've just got one more thing that I want to talk about there, because I did mention the comparisons between all these creatures and Inside, and they're mostly psychological comparisons. But there's also this glaring visual comparison, and that's the scene in both films where the father asks his young son to come and sit with him in the front seat while he's driving. The
Mm.
two scenes are almost shot for shot, and I'm wondering, was there a reason that you wanted to include that particular moment and scenario in both films?
It's an interesting thing because that scene didn't really come into the script until super late, like quite close to us shooting. I'd made a change and I had to rewrite some things, and that scene came back. And because I didn't want to do things that were in the short film in any literal sense, but it felt like I was avoiding what was so obviously the right scene for the movie, just out of I don't want to redo anything from the short in a literal sense.
Mm,
But I
mm.
was like, the movie wants this scene, so just, this is appropriate. And it just felt like the absolute, right scene. Like it felt kind of self-centered or something for me to go, oh, I don't want to do it because I don't want to do something that people will know was from the short film. It just
Yeah.
it felt like it was appropriate for the film, and I was doing my best to like hold things away out of just like I don't know what, not wanting to repeat something.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
it felt very resonant to what I wanted the audience to experience at that moment and what that character would go through. And um yeah,
Yeah.
it was sort of that simple.
Yeah. Did you reference that scene from the short film again while you were shooting the scene from Inside, or did it just come to you naturally?
Yeah, it just came naturally. We were not really talking in terms of shots or anything like that. It wasn't a recreation.
No.
It was like and also the scene is in a narrative sense, it's a completely different intention
Yes.
for the character. Like in Inside, it's not like what goes on in the short. In the short, obviously, it's like it's him being picked up by his dad and everything unraveling, and it ends very differently. But here it's him later feeling culpable for something that he knows he wasn't supposed to do, which
Yeah.
was, you know, take his dad to his new where they've moved to the new house. So it's the narrative context is very different. But I think also it taps into a common memory that we all have as kids is being in a car with your parent driving.
Yes.
And then also metaphorically what it feels like to be a kid, which is that you're not behind the wheel.
Mm.
We all know that feeling, and that's the feeling that's relevant to the film thematically. And you're not the one behind the wheel. You're not the one driving the car, and yet you're the one that is maybe feeling responsible for the outcome. Um, and so on a sensory level and on a cinematic level, it just felt like this is right for this particular moment in the
Yeah.
film.
Yeah, it's such a great moment in both films, and I didn't even think of the metaphorical reasoning behind that scene. So thanks for sharing that with us. I'm sure our listeners will get a lot out of that as well. I guess that's a great segue into discussing Inside now. You've said that you grew up in a volatile environment and that you've had family members in and out of prison. Considering this film explores generational trauma or inherited damage, as you've described it, what stopped you from going down a similar path to the ones that the characters of Inside have gone down? And I don't expect you to get too personal here, but you have shared those particular parts.
I think the best answer is to say I don't know. And that the film in some ways is a way of me exploring that. And whether you can really pat yourself on the back for not not doing things that may have never been in your nature. You don't know. I mean, I was very hard on myself growing up, to not do to not become the kind of person I didn't want to become. But at the same time, I didn't know whether I had any control over that. I still don't know if that was something that I willed into being. I mean, just as give one example of a million, you're like, can you really can you really pat yourself on the back for not being a heroin addict if you were never that inclined towards taking heroin all the time? So I think these things are interesting, like, and forgetting my narrow personal experience, but as a human experience, what is how much do we determine the people we become? We do like to pat ourselves on the back for the things that we've achieved and things like that, and try to ignore the things that we've done wrong. The things we've done wrong, of course, it's not our problem. It's not our fault. That's always because of circumstances or whatever. Things we've achieved, it's all because of us. So there's this lot of storytelling that we do for ourselves, which is obviously really important, so that we can feel confident in the world and not feel like we're at the mercy of everything all the time. But it's how reliable that stuff is, and whether we really are completely responsible for the damage we cause. And finally, whether that matters. Like, are we completely, if someone's done so much damage to us, and I'm sure everyone in the world has had someone do some level of damage to them, and maybe someone you're even related to, was that person really completely intending to do that on a fundamental level? Are they completely in control? Are they congenitally damaged? Are they genetically damaged? Are they disfigured by their own life experiences? And then finally, if they do tick all those boxes, does it even matter? Like, if they're going to continue to whatever, they're going to steal your car again. If the fact that they have addiction issues is going to persist, you may still need your car.
Yeah.
So I think these things are fertile ground for a film, largely because I don't think I could give a particularly easy answer to any of it.
Yeah. In lesser hands, the characters in this film could have easily become cliched, mediocre movie villains, but you've done this masterful job at humanizing these characters, which is also kind of what you've just said there. How deep did your research go into the psychology of these characters?
Very, maybe a little too deep. Like, it was so pretty troubling to live with all this all the time, and some of it's myself, I guess, or my own life. But then some of it is there's a lot of research in a very literal sense of other stories of people that have done horrific crimes as kids. So there was a lot of those stories I was reading, and also it's interesting to see the public's reaction to those stories. Like, that's interesting too. And there was 4 years of visiting prisons, and including juvenile detentions centers, and some of that is researching the absolute detail of everyday life, which then helps your imagination come up with things as well. And some of it's the details of talking to people, and you've suddenly realized, right, you don't want to get out. Like, you really want to, you're terrified of the outside world, that the outside world is actually the prison for you, because you're a prisoner of your own behavior. And here you're liberated from causing the kind of damage you don't want to cause. So there's a lot of irony to what prison is for a lot of these people. And I think you see some of that in Guy's character is if you have such little, you have issues with impulse control and self-centeredness or whatever it may be, you know, liberty isn't the same thing as freedom. That having your liberty and suddenly you're outside, you're in a prison of your own making now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How do you stay positive writing such dark characters? How do you
Um,
keep a positive mindset when you're not focused on writing these characters?
well, I struggle to be honest, but I have a really great partner who's and I've got two lovely kids, so that helps a lot. I don't think I could go as you know I would sort of, I don't think I could kind of think about such weighty things because the film isn't bleak at all, I don't
No,
think, and it's not a
no.
depressing film. I don't really like watching movies like that, but I'm weighing up some very dark things that I'm
Yeah.
then interpreting in a way that I think is something the way I would like to watch something, which isn't depressing. It's sort of you try to make it generous and interesting and cinematic, but yeah, you day to day you're going into some pretty dark questions, which is your own fault because you could have
Yes.
made a movie about anything. So it's your choice. But I think having a great relationship and a supportive partner and some lovely kids who, of course, remind you every second that you're not the center of the universe allows you to go to those kinds of places and
Yeah.
still come back.
Yeah, I'm moving this question up. I want to ask you this question now, but I had it much further down the list. But I want to ask you now because some of what you've just said has reminded me of what Thomas M. Wright told me while he was making The Stranger, and how much he suffered mentally, writing that narrative. I think he ended up in hospital, and there are many executive producers credited on this film, but the one name that really does stand out is Thomas M. Wright, an actor and filmmaker in his own right, who listeners will know from Acute Misfortune and Stranger. Can you tell us about Thomas's contribution to this film and how he was involved?
Yeah, I mean, it was very gradual. Like he was very generous early on. With my short film was out the same year as Acute Misfortune, and
Mhm.
in some ways, we're having mirror opposite experiences in the festivals or whatever. And then he was very un-Australian in his generosity. It was not like there's often people kind of feel like other filmmakers in Australia sometimes feel it's a bit of a zero-sum game that if you that it's either you have to be competitive. And Tom and I just started talking and being friends, and then he would share this movie that he was considering doing, The Stranger, and he was trying to write it, and I'd read his draft and he would read Inside, and we were just going back and forth. But then obviously The Stranger got made before Inside did, and he was in a better position to help with something. I mean, the main thing that where afterwards he was like, it would be good to be a part of the executive producing team was he helped get the script to Guy.
Yes. Mm.
The guy had Guy's agent had initially rebuffed us, and Guy was my first choice for the character. And this happens a lot, I think. And then Tom uh, shared it with I guess I'll just go tell the story. So Guy shared it with Joel. I asked him to pass it to Joel to pass to Guy, and Joel was kind enough to do that. And then Joel Edgerton, and then Guy read it and was like, "Whoa, this is great. I'm in." So that kind of already is like a helpful mechanism to get a movie going, and that's Tom being part of the executive producer team, and Tom was also just a good person to he knows how lonely it is to be a director and how difficult the process is. So he was great to talk to. He's going through it sort of more as a friend is it than anything, but just just it's good to have someone to bounce things around with and go, what do you think of this draft, this cut, the way you do with if a lot of a friend that you can use as a sounding board while you're making something.
Yeah. I love hearing that. And, listeners of this podcast will know that I bang on about collaboration. There's no such thing as doing things alone in this industry. So to have someone like Thomas, beside you must have been a great joy.
Yeah, exactly. It's actually just a emotional comfort a lot of the time
Yeah.
to have someone who knows what you're going through, especially if you're up against it with whatever's going on. I mean, that's just a friend, I suppose. But then also, I think it's important that people realize that. I mean, this may go on. This may just be me because I didn't go to film school. I think a lot of people who go to uni have their own little inner circle where they
Yes.
can
Yes.
collaborate with, and I think maybe I
Yeah.
missed out on that.
Right.
But I do feel a lot of the time people think that being generous with other filmmakers is somehow taking something from them, or that
Mm,
if they succeed, somehow you're losing. And
mm,
it's a very bad mindset. And everything I've done that's been generous towards another filmmaker, I feel like I benefit from anyway. I don't know whether it's psychologically or literally.
mm.
We're not racing against each other. Like it's very helpful to help other filmmakers and to try to you know be generous. Like
Yeah,
it's good for you.
it really is. It
You
really
know,
is.
yeah.
You're listening to the Cinema Australia podcast on SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or at cinemaaustralia.com.au.
I want to go back to the humanisation of these characters. I think Tammy MacIntosh has one of the best lines in the film when she says that her 15 years in childcare were no different to her time working in the prison. Boy, I laughed at that line a
Yeah.
few times. Were you? But it got me wondering. Especially Tammy's character. Were you just as focused on those supporting characters on the other side of the prison system during your research?
Oh yeah. I mean, movies always to me, I don't care how good the lead roles are. If the rest of the film doesn't feel believable, authentic, and interesting, it's very hard to be that interested in the movie to me.
Mm,
So I'm always, very focused on, what I guess you call supporting characters,
yeah.
particularly because I think, and in this movie, almost all of the officers are real officers that are currently working, and the vast majority of inmates are former inmates. And they become a massive resource, not just in terms of the day-to-day,
Mm,
how would you do this kind of stuff, but in legitimizing the world as a whole, which reverberates through the whole film to the other performances and to everything. The whole world becomes more believable, and you include people. You don't just just push them into the background and say, hey, you got a good looking face, that'll sell the movie. You include them so that they know that if you're doing something and you ask them, hey, how's this feel to you as well, and you try to um, collaborate with them. And in the specific case of Tammy, I'd met so many officers in the research of the film that I could draw on with and help Tammy have access to. With her, I mean, the first discussion was just me saying to her, the important thing is that you've got this character's all compassion
mm,
and zero empathy.
mm,
No,
mm.
like she's there to help these people, but she is not going to be she's not going to cry at night if
Yes.
they fuck up
Mm,
because they're most likely going to, and she can't have that emotional drain and continue to do this work. She wants the best for you. She's going to help you if you're drowning, but she's not going to feel the effects of you drowning. So there's a sort of, which is the most helpful thing you can do. So she's I really love the character, and I really love. I think Tammy does such a great job,
mm.
um, and was just also like a real joy, um, real joy to be able to work with.
The casting of this film is so unbelievably perfect, and I could speak about all of those supporting characters as much as I could speak about the three leads, but I guess I have to ask you what listeners want to hear. Is Guy Pearce the only actor in the world with the ability to film an anniversary episode of a 38-year-old soap opera, then be nominated for an Oscar for an almost 4-hour epic, then make an edgy Australian indie all within the span of about 3 or 4 years? Is he as complex to work with as all of that sounds?
I think that might even just be 2 years or one. Like, yeah,
So
he really,
yes.
um, yeah, that's definitely Guy. I mean, yeah, you look at, yeah, even that speaks a lot about who he is in a way. Yeah, it's he's he was so good to work with on the film. And as was all of I mean, to talk specifically about the three leads, the casting is sort of everything, and I won't let it go, no matter what the pressures may be, and no matter what the concerns are about what this thing is, or the money, or the whatever, um, or how difficult it is to, put the lead of the film, find a kid that's never acted before who's 15.
Mhm.
I'm willing to take any risk because it's the thing that's most interesting to me in a movie is, and the thing that will most quickly undo a movie is bad casting.
Mhm.
And Guy, Vinny, and Cosmo, they couldn't be more different, which is by design. Like the characters are supposed to be very different.
Mm.
The opposite in many ways, particularly Guy and Cosmo. You want Mark Sheppard and Warren Murphy to be polar opposites, so that one's very kind of pragmatic, existential, and that his problems are coming from that, and his solutions are coming from that, and the other one is very kind of spiritual and sort of religious and whatever, and the same. His solutions and problems are coming from that, and so you want to cast people that, outside of just having a great acting ability, have an energy and a feeling that provides that. And it's very hard to do. Like it took an immensely long time for me to find who I thought would be the right person for Mark Sheppard's character. Guy just came to me after I finished the script as like, okay, who would I really want to see do this, and so could do a good job of it. That list narrowed down to basically Guy. Because I hadn't seen him do anything like this before. He's not where he's kind of like a bit of an id, self-sabotaging, the sort of character. And but I also felt it was there, without knowing him. I just, not that that's him, but that would have access to this sort of personality, and he felt the same way, which I was very fortunate in. And Cosmo, he just, once you've got Guy, you want to cast in opposition to him and in collaboration with him to find Cosmo. And I was really fortunate that I eventually saw his work, and it was one conversation with him, and I was like, let's get him immediately. He's going to be incredible. And then and then there's Vinny, and all of them have the opposite ways of working, and Vinny's just a total gift to have found. It's super exciting to work with all three and be a different director for all three.
Guy Pearce told one of my friends recently during an interview, and I'm not sure if he's telling everyone this, but Cosmo Jarvis went full method and took his character to the streets. Were you aware of that? Was it something that was encouraged?
Yeah, I mean, I'd just say it's immersive. I mean, why not? Like that's sort of what I'd be doing. It's you want to. It's particularly if you're playing someone who's, it's not you, and it's the fun of acting is to kind of go someplace pretty far, and it's not your accent too, so you want to stay in that. It's not easy to just turn it on and off, and he likes to get right into it, which I love, and I'm there for it. I like to be part of that, and that doesn't mean that he's not accessible to you as a director, and that you can't ask him the technical requirements of a given shot or whatever at all. He's not there going, "Oh, my character wouldn't, wouldn't have a tracking shot." Like it's none of that. He's very professional, and he's also got his foot in the world of who that character is and he's holding on tight to all the things that he needs to have access to for that character.
I don't think there are any other words to describe Vincent Miller other than a revelation here, but I'm particularly interested in this character's tic, which is his blinking eyes. Did that take much work with Vincent to get that done?
Not really. Like it was in the script, which is one of those things where you're like, like a few things in the script, like the speaking in tongues or whatever. You're like, this, this is good on the page, or how do we make sure this works really well so it's not a device or whatever. It's not manufactured. And so, we're speaking to Vinny about, he doesn't have tics or whatever, but it's about kind of understanding the process by which that is relieving, is the thing. So trying to connect it to something that he can understand as well, which is, it's an itch that you want to scratch and that you can't, it just builds up, and then you do it, and it's a very natural thing, and you don't want to overplay it or over manufacture it. It just sort of can come out. So yeah, that was one of many things, and that also helped Vinny, I think, kind of key into who this character is, because Vinny's not this kid, but Vinny has a talent for empathy, which great actors do, where he somehow could understand the very strange choices that this character makes, which aren't particularly easy to automatically. He's not an easily interpreted kid, and Vinny could get it, even though he wouldn't make those choices. So it was, he's really a joy to, real joy to work with, and I think a real help in a way that he wouldn't have expected, and other people wouldn't, to the other actors, to Guy and to Cosmo. They both really have said how present he is and how great he is in the scene. Is, you can't not be good when someone's really reacting to you in the moment based on what you're doing. He really draws it out of you because he's so there, and he's so glued and in the scene with you.
I can't wait to see where his career goes. Really looking forward to that. I recently received an email completely out of nowhere, completely out of the blue, from Dan Lee, who was your editor on Inside.
Yeah.
And we've been chatting about his work as well as his time on this film. He told me about sharing a first cut of the film with your peers, and how it was quite a painful experience for both of you, he said, but he was speaking about himself mainly. And he also shared how valuable that experience was in shaping this final cut. Can you elaborate on that experience from your point of view? How much did that how much did it change from that original cut to what we see on screen now?
Yeah, well, I have to say Dan's, as important as a collaborator as I've ever had. I've often edited my own work, and I've worked with a lot of different editors, but Dan and I have an excellent working relationship that's super important, and he's a great editor. And so anyway, but yeah, that first cut. Look, we didn't have a lot of time in the edit, the kind of time that I'd like to have, and we knew it. And like I said to Dan, starting off, like we have to do 6 months of editing in 3 months, and he knew it too. It's like, yep, we'd worked together on the short. He knows how I work, and all the stones have to be overturned. You need to go through every take, you need to go through every line, you have to really be rigorous. And the film was not going to be an easy edit because it's three characters, how they relate, how they balance. You've got flashbacks. Voiceover is unbelievably difficult, especially if you're not just slapping it on at the end to explain stuff, if you're using it in a certain way. So it's very hard to create an edit properly. And so the first cut was like, this thing is nowhere near ready to show, but this is the time. Like we're 1 month in or whatever it may have been, and we're just going to have to show something that we're pretty ashamed of to a bunch of people, because it will accelerate this process.
Yeah.
Instead of chipping away at it and shaping it, we will come out of this with such such shame that we will get in there with a axe and we will go, all right, and it needed that. It needed, we couldn't sit there with a scalpel because we'd need 6 months. We needed to go, okay, right, let's see what's really a problem here, and then reshape from there. So it's a necessary process. I mean, every filmmaker, their first cut, it's brutal. But sometimes you got to rip that Band-Aid off.
Dan's done such a terrific job here. Would you work with him again? Is he someone you want to continue making movies with?
Totally. Yeah. No, Dan's he's a friend and a very important collaborator. And I talk to him when I'm writing. We talk all the way through it. So I'd recommend him to any filmmaker, except for the fact that I want to keep him to myself. So
yes. We're nearing the end of this interview here, so I think it's a good time to go into spoiler territory here for a moment. So if you are listening to this and you haven't seen the film yet, I recommend coming back to this part of the interview later. But there's a moment at the beginning of the film where Mark hands Mel a hand-drawn flyer for his sermon. And in the drawing, I noticed that Mark is actually on fire. Were you revealing Mark's demise through that drawing?
yes, yeah. I like I like things that feel a bit predetermined.
Yeah.
And I like in movies, there's been movies where you feel like there's not just like a sense of determinism, but there's almost a dreamlike sense of something that's, when you rewatch the movie, that's already seeded, or that it seeps into you, so that when something you watch, I think the film that really made this happen for me when I was young was Vertigo. I watched that a zillion times when I was a teenager, and you just felt there's something very haunted about watching it. And part of that was that so much that happens in the film is an echo of something that's already subconsciously been shown, whether it be a shadow or a look or a sound. The film is just full of echoes of itself, and it creates this very haunted feeling that you can't quite articulate. And I really, this is pretty magical stuff. So yeah, that was something that I thought an audience it'll be there in an unconscious sense, that this flyer that he's drawn is a predetermined image.
Is there ever a part of you that feels like it might be too much of a risk, that you might be giving something away? I mean, I doubt anyone is going to pick up on it, but I'm just wondering, as a filmmaker, do you ever feel it might be too much of a risk?
No, not really. I mean, that's the whole like, there's a million things like that every day with the film, of like, how much are you revealing? How much do you want people to know? How much do you want them to know subconsciously? How much do you want them to know literally? Do you want them to be ahead of the film here or behind the film? And that's something you're doing the whole time. So no, I didn't think people would ever clock that and suddenly go, I know in a literal sense where this film's going.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you talk us through that burning scene? Because there is a real mix of CGI and practical effects being used here. Was it much of a challenge to shooters to shoot this scene? Can you talk us through it?
Yeah, it's very it's immensely challenging, and it's a safety concern, and there's a lot that goes into that. And also when you're doing something that's so onerous in terms of safety as well as CGI and all that, you also want to not forget that you don't want it to look like that it's a safety CGI scene. And so you're working with a stunt guy, and stunt guys are trained to act a certain way, which is wrong. They always do the same thing. They wave their hands in the air, and it's like, that's not what someone would do. That's what people train you to do on film because it looks good. But if you were on fire, that's not what you'd be trying to put yourself out. So do that. Don't I'm just saying one of 100 details, and then the stunt guy and I said, Cosmo, let's all have a conversation, and Cosmo, tell him what you would be doing, and let's get this right so that it's what you do, not what would look good if you were Freddy Krueger and on fire. So there's a bit of that sort of stuff, and then there's just a lot of the typical technical CGI stuff, and you want to get all that stuff right, but you also want to go do it the hard way. Like, let's not do it so it's easy for CGI or whatever. Let's do it so it's what I do if it was happening. Let's shoot it how I want to shoot it if it wasn't complicated. And so that's a big part of it. And then it evolves a little bit in the edit, because I remember one point looking at it and going, it felt like we were going, whoa, look at this. Like, and you couldn't help but go, wow, they really CGI fired that guy, or that's, and so I had to go, okay, wait a minute, we need to drop that shot and let's let's see this just from a very plain angle when we first see it. Let's go to the security camera.
Mm.
Let's not tease it. Let's not hype it. Let's not overdo it. Let's be kind of matter of fact. And
Yeah.
so there's a lot that goes into not just the technical realization of it, which I really think I did maybe 50 drafts between me and the effects house of one shot in particular. There's a lot that goes into frame by framing and the comping of elements and being meticulous about how something works. But there was also other things in the film that are not so obvious that are VFX that you have to be very rigorous with. And we had a great post house that were in Sweden and Finland, and they did excellent work. And it's just about being able to talk to them in their language and being very specific about very, very specific about which frame has what thing, and then making sure that the layers that you're creating are interacting properly.
Well, they must have done a good job because I didn't pick up on any other visual effects shots. So that's great.
That's good.
I've got two more questions here, and one of them I usually ask at the end of this podcast. I ask all my guests this, but I'm going to bring it forward one question here. But have you seen any Australian films lately that have really stood out for you that you've really enjoyed watching?
You know what? I watched In Vitro, which I was impressed by.
Yeah.
I thought they did it was a really good, well executed, obviously kind of kind of low budget, smart movie. And I thought that was really well realized.
Yeah,
Really
such an
impressed.
incredible film.
Yeah, and not perhaps not getting the sort of attention it should in Australia in particular. I think it's one of those films that Americans are going, whoa. But I do think more Australian audiences should check it out.
Yeah, definitely. I highly recommend that one. So if you are listening to this and you want to find a new Australian film to watch, seek that one out. I've actually had quite a few arguments with people about that film who didn't like the main character. They just thought he was a complete dick for what he was doing. But I think I had a little bit of empathy for that character in that he was trying to make himself better every time he did what he did, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, that's right. I think that the movie is it's sort of a semi-high concept kind of movie,
Yeah.
and often those movies, they're not about complex psychology or in any sense. But I think this film does have that. They don't go into good guy, bad guy territory. They kind of go, you can sort of you can see where he's coming from, despite how to the place that is. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, I've got one final question here for you, and I'm not sure if anyone else has done this with you yet, but I've got a fantail question for you.
Hey.
And if you know the answer straight away, maybe just let it ride a bit for anyone who's listening and want to try to guess it as well. But
you want me to I'll wait till the end?
Yeah, maybe wait till the end. Yeah, I'm sure you'll pick it up straight away, but let's see how you go. Yeah. All right. Born in Melbourne in 1968, she began her career as a child actress. Her big break came when she was offered a recording contract with Mushroom Records in 1987. Her first single became the highest selling single of the decade. She has achieved worldwide record sales of more than 60 million. During a tour in 2005, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. After treatment in 2006, she returned with the Showgirl The Homecoming Tour, followed by For You, For Me Tour in 2009. She has also appeared as the judge on the third series of The Voice Australia. Who am I?
That's got to be Kylie Minogue, right?
It's Kylie Minogue. Well done. Yeah. Did you pick that up straight away?
Pretty much, but yeah, that's good. He doesn't like a fantail.
No, that's right. I miss fantails.
Me too. I bought 6 kilos of them when I heard they were going out of style
production.
Out of production, for the film.
Yeah.
By the time the film rolled around, I think I only had about a kilo left, half a kilo left, and then found out that we couldn't use them anyway.
Wow. Charles, it's been so great to chat with you, and I can't thank you enough for sharing your stories about this film. Thanks for joining the Cinema Australia podcast.
No, thanks very much. Thanks for having me. It was great to talk.
Thanks for listening. Find all the latest Australian film news at cinemaaustralia.com.au. You can follow Cinema Australia on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok.